Okay, so I was debating, I was trying to make a video earlier and my iPad is out of space, so I couldn't really make a video, so I decided to go live. And I may paint for a few minutes. Behind me is Mahitable the Tattooed Lady. Sorry, behind me is Mahitable the Tattooed Lady, a painting I've been working on for a few months, and it's found a new home in North Carolina, so it will be heading out in a bit. But it's given me time to think and rethink the colors that I'm using and the way I'm approaching her. I'm really pleased with the way she's coming out. If you can see, I'm really pleased with the way she's coming out. Wait a minute. There we go. Okay, I'm really pleased with the way she's coming out. I've taken my time and I've really considered pretty much every brush stroke, where it's going to lay, how it's going to affect the brush stroke next to it, how it's going to allow color underneath to flow through, if it will block the color, the layer I'm putting on, if it'll block the color underneath, which I don't always want. I used to put paint on top of paint on top of paint, and I thought that's what made you a good painter. And now I'm understanding something different. It's not always about what you apply. Sometimes it's about what you don't apply and how you don't apply it. I've talked about in other videos using Gamblin' Artist colors, medium Neo McGilp, and I don't get paid for this. I just love this stuff. This medium was introduced to me, whoops, there. That medium was introduced to me by another painter, and it completely changed the way I painted, completely changed the way I saw things, and completely changed the way I saw my paintbrushes and my strokes. And now, you know, after several years of practice, we're starting to see the results of it, the results of the understanding and the taking time to learn. Now I love, this is one thing I really love about painting now, is applying the brush, applying color but with Neo McGilp in it, putting the brush down and watching the paint and the medium come up around the edges of the brush, and believe me, they're not that big. This is the normal size of one of my brushes, not very huge, but watching the paint and the medium come up around the sides of it and apply a thin layer of color over the color underneath. So I'm not completely covering it. I have that option to go back in and do it, but in the meantime, I've got this thin layer of color going over the top of the layer it's applying to, something like that. Thin layer of color going to the canvas, blah, blah, blah. But I've also got these really lovely strokes, these really lovely lines following where the brush had been on the sides. And that gives me something else to play with. It's a really beautiful medium. But I'm looking at this painting tonight and I'm thinking how much my work has changed in the last 10 years, in the last, well, 30 years ago I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to do this. 20 years ago I didn't know how to do this. 10 years ago I really didn't know how to do this. This is fairly recent, 6-7 years, that I've been using oil on aerosol. That I've been doing things like allowing the underpainting to really show through, allowing the textures, different textures from my aerosols to show through. It's only in the past 6-7 years that I've learned not to apply too much aerosol, not to apply too much oil on top of the aerosol, to let them breathe and be on their own so they don't crack. It really has only been in the past 6-7 years. But looking at this and thinking about how many changes my artwork has gone through, or my applications of paint have been through in the past, 8 million years of my life, how I started off really knowing nothing and really wanting to be a good painter and trying but not understanding, and then learning about mediums and really learning about paints and different types of paint, different companies, how it's transformed me. How it's just the mediums and the understanding and the practice has given me courage and confidence to do this, to talk to people, and to show my work, and to know my value, to completely understand my value as an artist. it didn't happen overnight. I get frustrated with galleries because a lot of people, they just want 20-year-olds. They want pretty 20-year-olds. Not everyone has actual talent at 20, 30 years old. Sometimes it takes a while. You know, it took me forever and a day. Forever and a day. It took me a while to get there. Now I'm at this point where I absolutely love painting. I get frustrated, but I love it. I look forward to the moment I pull out my brush and I run it through some medium with paint and develop this really beautiful technique on the canvas that I didn't know how to do. 10 years ago, 5 years ago I did. Whatever. Anyway. But I was also thinking about how this painting came out of other paintings, came out of other paintings, came out of other paintings. I'm painting this one, my friend Maggie, Alopecia, and every time I hit one of those, I think back to a painting I did in the past. This one takes me directly back to a painting that I absolutely love. It's sitting, right now, it's sitting with Blue Egg Gallery, and it's really one of my favorite paintings, and I wish I could show you, but I don't have an editing program to show you pictures. It's called Dada's Boy. Sorry, I got paint everywhere. Got to throw a cloth on the ground. It's called Dada's Boy. D-A-apostrophe-S, boy. And it's a play on the Dada movement. Dada actually meant hobby horse. So in the painting it also says hobby horse or something like that. So it's a play on the Dada movement. It's a young boy sitting on a horse, and he's painted in an hobby horse, and it's painted in an avant-garde manner. I still can't believe I did this painting because I really love it. But there were aspects of that painting that I've taken through others, including this one, and especially with her tattoos. That's where that painting, Dada's Boy, is where I really started to use textures, aerosol textures in my paintings. I started applying yellows and reds and greens using stencils and doilies and other things that I have in the backgrounds. And if you can find it online, Beck Lane Dada's Boy, it's on my website and around. There are sections of the painting where you can't see the textures underneath, and then there's other sections of the painting where the textures underneath glow. They absolutely glow through. There's a bit with trees coming up and around that I still think about every time I sit down, every time I paint. I think about this one section of trees where they're somewhat shaded, there's lots of color in there, a little bit of texture, but lines, the lines that I use. And then in the center, in the breakthrough of the trees and the leaves, that are highly defined, but are there, are these textures and colors in the background. And you can see where I've applied Neo McGilp, but haven't overloaded that section of the canvas. Now that was also born out of another painting I did. I did two paintings called My Pet. One is quite large and is in Virginia, and a smaller one which started this whole thing with the trees and the movement and the colors in between and the lines cutting into lines and the brush strokes cutting in and sending little lines and sections out in different directions. It started with a very small My Pet, another painting you can find online. Well, I loved playing with the paint in that particular way so much, and that was just when another artist had introduced me to Neo McGilp. I loved playing with the paint in that particular way, with these colors coming and the lines and the blah blah blah, that I needed to do a larger one. So I did a 3-foot by 5-foot version. And that one, there's this bush line in back of, there's a figure of a young girl holding a kitten. And in the back of her, in both paintings, there's a line of bushes, of hedge. There's a hedgerow, but it's in between. the branches and the leaves that's interesting. It's not the hedgerow, it's the in-between bits. From the little one I learned lessons and how to do paint the in-between and not the actual, that I then transferred to a larger version, the 5 foot by 3 foot my pet. And learning from those little bushes and those little lines and the cutting and the paint spreading, other paint colors aside, as I'm applying my brush, bore something else. In the larger my pet, in the background, she's standing, there's a building in back of her, and the windows are different colors, and there's brush strokes, there's swipes, where you can see I was getting braver and braver about my brush strokes. That's also about the time I started using black gesso over white gesso. Instead of just flat white or flat black, it's black and white gesso, which has then gone on to bore a whole nother turn in the way I paint and how I apply my paints and my aerosols. So I think what I'm trying to say is this from that, and one step leads to another step. But it's funny how each of these paintings, every time I sit down to do a painting or I start applying paint, automatically the lesson I learned back in My Pet 1, then My Pet 2, then Dada's Boy, how it is all applied to the next painting. I'm working on a painting now with my friend Maggie, or Jadez. She's a young African-American woman who lives here in Sarasota, who I saw walking down the street, and I could not take my eyes off her. It's a little creepy, but I stopped and I asked if I could do her portrait, and she said yes, and thank God she did. Well, I'm doing it, and I got a little frustrated with the figure work in it, that her head was not quite tilted correctly, or it didn't look right. Well, I've learned from other paintings, like My Pet, like Dada's Boy, to dig in and feel the figure. Feel how her head actually sits. Feel how Mahidable's head actually sits, how her shoulder would sit, instead of how does it look? How does it look right? Maggie had to be completely reshaped over the weekend, but I'm really, really happy with her now. And I'm applying techniques to her that I am using here and not using here in different ways. Maggie is African American, black woman, so I'm taking the lessons I've learned from painting people who aren't white also and applying it to her. In how the light hits her skin. Let me get her. Oops, sorry about that. There we go. How the light hits her skin, how it affects the tones. I don't like to use browns and Caucasian colors. I don't like it. It's too predictable. And it takes anything interesting and wipes it away. Using teals and greens adds a whole nother conversation that the viewer can have with the painting, with themselves about the painting. So I'm using a lot of greens here. She probably won't stay Kermit green. She's most likely going to change color. But I'm taking lessons I've learned in other paintings of African American children that I've done, tons of them, or not tons of them, but a bunch of them, and applying it here. So I'm thinking, let me see, I'm trying to think what my point is, other than it's just learning and learning and learning and learning and learning. I kind of wanted to talk about collecting art and what to look for in an artist, and that was kind of part of it, because for me, and what history says is what you want to see, what you want to invest in. When you're buying artwork, what you want to invest in is the stage the artist is in and how it excites you. And how the path you can see the artist taking, and how their work will be evolving. It's kind of what I really wanted to talk about. I just hit that way awkwardly, but we think about Frida Kahlo, we think about Picasso, we think about all the greats, we think about Van Gogh, we think about Matisse. Van Gogh, he started off painting I can't remember what, but then he ended up in this really exciting stage of using these colors and mediums that were brand new to the market because of the industrial age, and suddenly metals could be added to paint to get really luminous colors. And he transformed art. He transformed painting. He transformed the Impressionist movement. And we're still feeling ripples of that today. People didn't invest in him when he was alive, which is really stupid. Now we know. But if they had, they could, well, which they do now. Okay, this is a really bad example. But anyway, when you're investing in an artist, or when you're buying an artist's work, you're not just buying, this is a pretty picture of. This is a pretty picture of a woman with tattoos. You're investing in, when people buy work, they're buying the technique, the understanding of the medium, and the stage that the artist is in, and where they will be going, and where they have been in the past, and watching that. You know, My Pet 1, My Pet 2, Dada's Boy, Mehitable, Maggie, or Yadez. You're watching the growth, and you're a part of it. And I think that's what people should be looking for when they're collecting work, and not necessarily pretty picture of lighthouse. Okay, that was kind of incoherent, but I gave it a good try, and that's it. I have to go now because I had a celebratory dinner with my friend Wayne, and we ate fried pickles. And by we, I mean me. I ate a big basket of fried pickles, and I had a cheeseburger. So my brain is convoluted. It's filled with fried food and grease. So I'm going to go. I think I'm going to get off camera and paint. Yeah, I think that's for the best because I feel a little bit gas building up. Anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, sort of in a weird and bizarre way. And we'll try again on another day when I haven't been eating cheeseburgers and fried pickles. Ciao.